In this video, I'll be providing a project status update on this 1988 Porsche 944 and a breakdown of the maintenance and repairs performed during my 4th year of ownership, along with their associated costs. Looking back at year 3, while I wasn't able to put many miles on the car during that time, as it was down for a number of months being repaired, I was able to complete some extensive restoration, which included a top-end engine rebuild to address a compression issue at cylinder 4, an overall engine bay refresh with some powder coating and zinc plating to bring back the factory appearance of the steel components, as well as a new alternator, battery, and starter, to name a few items. My list of outstanding maintenance tasks was becoming pretty short at this point, until November rolled around and the car sustained some lower front-end damage when it ended up in a ditch while avoiding a deer in the roadway. This was obviously a major setback that would set the tone for the work to be completed in year 4. The accident damage was disappointing to take in, but it also presented an opportunity to dig into the car a bit further than I otherwise would have at the time, and add in some new parts to the front end. I started the year off with quite a few hours of part number locating and shopping efforts, both for the necessary items as well as for some that could easily be refreshed while I was in there. I ended up placing orders with 6 different part vendors to acquire everything for the best possible price, and went with mostly new parts, some of which had to make their way overseas from Germany, which took a little over 3 weeks to arrive. The new front spoiler came over in a giant box with Air France labels on it, and once everything had come in, I had amassed quite an impressive collection of things to be installed. Parts that went into the front end rebuild included left and right wheel well liners for $263, a new front spoiler for $860, lower and middle air ducts for $100, left and right fog light assemblies for $253, a lower radiator hose for $10, a new old stock radiator for $475, a new air conditioning condenser for $530, and a new right radiator support bracket for $172, along with other various brackets and an extensive amount of new hardware. While waiting on the initial parts orders, I began the process of completely tearing down the front end by removing all the body panels and the functional components of the car so that the crushed right radiator support bracket could be replaced and painted. Forward progress was slowed at this point while waiting on availability at the body shop, as most of the paint shops in my area were backed up by 2 to 3 months at the time. But I was able to eventually get the car in, where the shop painted the new lower front spoiler, the aluminum front bumper, and the radiator support brackets in the factory Zermatt silver color. Paint repair costs came to $1,148.69. During the rebuild process, I was able to clean up some electrical connectors and grounding points along the way, where I also added in some high and low tone horns for $63, a thermofan switch for $40, a Bosch ignition coil for $102, as well as new turn signal connector boots and drainage hoses for $73. The car was out of operation for about 4 months while everything was being sourced and methodically pieced back together, but all the work dramatically improved the appearance of the car, and with all the new parts, it ended up in better overall condition than before the accident. Total repair costs for the front end reassembly came to $5,770.31. After getting the car back on the road, I was really looking forward to driving it a bit more and installing the Lindsay Racing MAF conversion kit I'd picked up in January. This kit replaces the factory airflow meter, or AFM, with an open intake tube and a blade-style mass airflow sensor, where we can see the benefits of some minor power increases, as well as in reliability by eliminating the mechanical moving part design of the AFM. There's really no tuning required for this kit outside of the fuel mix percentage using the factory fuel quality switch on the DME, but installation does involve opening the DME computer to swap out the EEPROM chip on the board. The new sensor requires a switched 12-volt power supply that I initially obtained by tapping into a relay at the central electrical panel, but later rerouted that to follow the path of the front wiring harness that runs behind the front bumper and over to the ignition coil. With the kit installed and dialed in, the before and after dyno testing results showed a horsepower increase of 4.8%, and its operation has been reliable since that point. After taxes and shipping, the MAF conversion kit cost $683, and I also added in a new paper gasket for $11 and an inline blade fuse for $9. Heading into the summer months, I was able to put a couple hundred miles on the car before discovering some new fluid leaks at the power steering rack and the lower balance shaft housing, so the car went up on jack stands for some new seals. Outside of the rear main seal, the balance shaft housing seals were the only remaining oil seals that had yet to be replaced on the engine under my ownership, and I had been wanting to refresh the hardware there anyway, so I wasted no time tearing down the front end of the engine once again. The upper balance shaft housing seal replacement is a breeze once the intake manifold is removed, but the lower balance shaft housing location presents a bit of difficulty. We'll get to that in a minute. The main housing uses a thin coat of Loctite 574 to seal the cover to the engine block. The factory workshop manual suggests using a velour roller to apply the sealant across the mating surface, but I just applied a small consistent bead and wiped away any excess after the installation. This compound cures in contact with metal and in the absence of air after the parts are secured, so there's no need to rush the application. Because of the tight positioning of the lower balance shaft housing on the right side of the engine, the power steering pump needs to be moved out of the way, the exhaust manifold needs to be disconnected, and the aluminum engine carrier needs to be removed in order to access the hardware at the rear of the housing. After loosening and shifting the manifolds out of the way, I supported the engine from below the oil pan with a floor jack so that the engine carrier could be removed, and at that point there was enough room to remove the balance shaft housing. I cleaned up the housing cover and the engine block as best I could with a wire brush before reassembling everything with all new hardware, and that really freshened things up. I finished off this repair with a set of new Gates belts, since the timing and balance shaft belts were approaching 4 years old at the point. And with all the seals, gaskets, belts, and hardware installed, cost for this repair came to $293.43. Before firing the engine back up, I decided to perform another oil change since the car had already been up on stands. For this change, I decided to switch to Valvoline's VR1 20W50 oil. I added in a Mala OC75 oil filter and a drain plug sealing ring. I also replaced the old rusted crankcase heat shield down by the oil pan with a new one for $82. Total cost for this maintenance came to $147.35. The next task was to tackle the leaking power steering rack, so I began pricing out some rebuilt racks, and I'd already ordered some new hydraulic lines for the repair. But after giving it some thought, I decided to change direction and instead chose to perform a power steering system delete, and then converted the car to manual steering using a custom kit that is derived from a Mark I Volkswagen Rabbit steering rack, with Volkswagen Scirocco tie rods and tie rod ends from the 1983 to 1986 Toyota Camry, and a longer intermediate shaft. This decision was partly driven by the countless stories of other 944 owners who had swapped out their power steering racks with rebuilt units, only to encounter new leaks at the rack within 1 to 2 years. The manual steering offers leak-free reliability, a better road feel, and a weight reduction of 14 pounds off the front of the car. After completing a front-end alignment of 1/16 inch toe-in across the front wheels, the car was nearly back on the road. Since I'd already had the front sway bar off the car, I opted to replace the inner rubber bushings for $42, the right side of which was pretty swollen by ATF exposure from a previously leaking power steering pump. When confirming the part numbers on the side of the bushings, I discovered there were 2 different sizes installed on the bar. One was 26.8 millimeters from the M030 Sport Suspension package, and the other was 25.5 millimeters from the 944 Turbo. After measuring the sway bar itself at 25.5 millimeters, I was surprised to find that someone had added a 944 Turbo sway bar to my base model NA at some point in the past, where the base model sway bar measures only 21.5 millimeters for this model year. Parts for the steering system repair came to $963.04. With summer now in full swing and the car back on the road, it was time to finally get it out and start to enjoy it a bit more. And on one such occasion, I found that the cruise control had become inoperable, so I began diagnosing the root cause of the failure. After checking the fuse, testing and adjusting the clutch pedal switch, along with the wiring, the switch stock, and the servo actuator, I determined the cruise control computer had failed. The aging circuit boards on these units are prone to microfractures and cold solder joints, but fortunately I was able to reflow all the solder joints on the control board using a heat gun, and that restored full functionality to the cruise control system. As year 4 was coming to a close, I took some time to diagnose a variety of engine noises, mainly some valve train chatter, and I ended up running a cleaning treatment through the engine to clear out some of the sludge there, along with another oil and filter change. 2 of the idler rollers were a little noisier than I would prefer as well, so I went ahead and replaced the timing and balance shaft belt idlers. The general guideline for these is to replace them at every other timing belt change interval, but you can also tell it's time to replace them when they spin very freely while exhibiting some bearing noise. You may also notice some side-to-side play in the bearing due to age, where a new roller bearing will be tight and virtually inaudible. Cost for this maintenance totaled $158.36. Just when I thought I was done with repairs for the year, the driver's side door handle trigger linkage failed on a particularly cold day in December, rendering it inoperable from the outside. So I picked up a new linkage arm for $85 to repair the door handle. This completed the mechanical repair and maintenance items for year 4, and outside of the $5,770 spent on the front-end rebuild, mechanical repair costs came to $2,859.37. In addition to these mechanical items, I completed some work on the interior and exterior of the car as well. As for the exterior, the first thing I did was to replace the left and right door handle seals for $37. Like the door handle linkage repair, these seals can be replaced from outside the car without getting too invasive by simply loosening and partially removing the door handle on each side. The next exterior item on the list was something I'd been putting off for some time, and that was the windshield replacement. Based upon prior research and the exorbitant factory glass prices, I'd resigned myself to going with an aftermarket Fuyao glass through Safelite, but after setting an appointment and waiting 2 weeks' time, I was told they could no longer source either the factory glass or their aftermarket option, so what would have been a $350 repair turned into one costing 6 times that amount, as I proceeded to source an OEM glass from Porsche for $1,183, a rubber outer frame for $90, and a top cover strip for $58. I ended up having my local dealership perform the installation at a cost of $922, which included the $200 adhesive kit. After the work was completed, the Porsche technician informed me that the prior glass was not the original one installed at the factory, that it had been replaced at some point in the past and the work wasn't done properly, where excessive sealant was used in some places and yet some of it was still not cured in others, so the hardener wasn't mixed correctly. At the end of the day, I ended up paying a lot more than I would have liked, but I know the job was done correctly with a warranty from the dealership, and the car will have its OEM glass with the embedded radio antenna, which is nice. Once a new windshield was on the car, I finished the repair by adding in a new plastic blower motor cover for $178. Exterior repair costs for year 4 totaled $2,466.07. For the interior of the car, I completed some work on the glove box by replacing the broken door hanger on the left side with a new set of metal glove box door stops from Renline for $45. This is a fairly simple repair, and the aftermarket option is a lot cheaper than replacing the entire glove box door with an OEM part from Porsche. While the work was being performed for the windshield replacement, the mounting tab for the rearview mirror had crumbled into dust, so I picked up an OEM mirror assembly for $170, but soon found that its tab was covered in a thick textured paint, and as a result, it wouldn't easily slide into the mounting bracket on the glass. So I shaved the tab down with a grinding tool for better fitment to get it mounted up. The last interior item I replaced was the passenger side door sill scuff plate that had cracked along the outer edges, and for this one, I applied a nicely conditioned used part for $43. Interior repair costs for year 4 came to a total of $257.70. Looking back on the year, I'm really happy with the restoration progress that was made, and coming out of the front-end repair on a positive note was a big win, which allowed me to drive the car a total of 1,317 miles during the year. One of my other goals for year 4 was to complete the air conditioning system refurbishment, but the windshield replacement costs ate up most of the remaining budget for the year, so that's something I'll be looking at in year 5, along with a wheel restoration and a windshield washer system repair. So here's a breakdown of costs for the year. The initial vehicle cost and first 3 years' expenses came to $16,485.94. Mechanical repairs for year 4 came to $2,859. The exterior and interior expenses were $2,466 and $258 respectively, and the accident repair costs were $5,770, making the grand total investment to date $27,839.39. And that concludes the review of the project log for year 4 on this 1988 Porsche 944.